afternoon. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we are on the traditional territory of the signatories of Treaty 7, and I'd like to acknowledge the Métis people of Alberta who share a deep connection and history with this land. I'm here today to call on the UCP to stop their $20 billion R-Star royalty giveaway at a time when so many Alberta families are struggling just to pay their bills. I want to start by taking a look back at how we got to this point. Shortly after the last election, an organization known as Sustaining Alberta's Energy Network started promoting an idea called R-Star that proposed giving royalty credits to oil and gas companies to clean up abandoned wells they are already obligated to clean up. Danielle Smith, who was working as a corporate lobbyist at the time, grabbed hold of the idea and started lobbying for it as well. She even wrote a letter to then Energy Minister Sonia Savage advocating for R-Star as a program. Based on this letter, it could cost up to $20 billion in royalty credits for the program. Savage and the UCP rightly opposed the move at the time. Fast forward to today, Danielle Smith is now Premier. The person who originally developed the idea is working in the Premier's office, and the UCP is pushing ahead with the program. Just yesterday, they held closed-door talks about the program at McDougall, but only a select few were invited to consult. To date, they have not held any public consultations on this program, just like they did with their plan to coal mine the Rockies. Since the details of this program have come to light, we have heard opposition from rural municipalities, economists, and landowners. The president of the Rural Municipalities of Alberta said, quote, "This is how a fox would design a hen house." And yesterday, Scotiabank released a scathing report about R-Star, saying that the plan could create negative public sentiment towards the oil and gas industry, and that it, quote, "goes against the core capitalist principle that private companies should take full responsibility for the liabilities they willingly accept." Scotiabank's analysis indicates that the companies stand to benefit most from this program are Canadian Natural Resources, Cenovus Energy, Paramount Resources, and Whitecap Resources. In the last quarter, those companies recorded a combined net income of nearly $5 billion. In fact, oil and gas companies are seeing record profits right now due to high energy prices. On top of this, they've already received a massive corporate tax cut worth billions of dollars. And yet, the amount of unpaid municipal taxes and lease payments continues to grow in this province. Now, Danielle Smith wants to give another $20 billion in royalty credits to these companies for something they are already obligated to do. It's another scam from Danielle Smith and the UCP. These royalties belong to the people of Alberta and to future generations. To give this away will squander the energy price boom we are currently experiencing, and it's fiscally irresponsible. It amounts to a massive transfer of wealth from Alberta families to companies who don't need it. All of this comes at a time when many Albertans are struggling to keep the lights on and put food on their table. Food bank usage is at an all-time high, and many Albertans can't get the medical care that they need. The UCP's priority is to give away billions of dollars of Albertans' money to already profitable corporations. Danielle Smith has the wrong priorities. They must stop this program immediately and use the money for what it's intended for, to invest in our province's future, fixing the crisis in healthcare, making life more affordable, and building a resilient economy. This is what the Alberta NDP government would be focused on. Thank you, and I'm happy to take your questions.
Okay, start with questions in person. Okay, no questions in person. We'll do questions on the line. Just remind if you're joining by phone, you press *9. If you're joining by Zoom, to use the raise hand function. First question goes to Bob Butler.
Am I unmuted?
Yes, we can hear you.
Concerns have been raised about possible connections between Danielle Smith's previous lobbying work, her fundraising for her leadership campaign, and her government's subsequent priorities. I wonder if you share those concerns.
I absolutely share those concerns. This is, once again, Danielle Smith, essentially being willing to do the bidding of those who put her in power. So we saw it, with her looking to potentially interfere in prosecutions of people that blockaded our border and conspired to murder, and we're seeing it again in terms of her, buddies from the lobbying industry and folks that donated to her leadership campaign. So I think it's a huge concern because I think that politicians should be making decisions in the best interest of Albertans. It's Albertans that put us here, it's Albertans we serve for, but Smith doesn't seem to serve those Albertans. She seems to serve private interests.
Did you have a follow-up, Bob?
I do. I'm wondering if there's anything that the Premier could do to ease these concerns about the source of funding and whether there's any sort of quid pro quo for the funding and the government's priorities.
Well, I mean, she could begin by talking about it. She could begin by doing actual public consultations on this, inviting all the landowners groups to participate, inviting the public to participate, speaking honestly with the public about, what the impact of this project will be. So I think it's going to be hard for her to alleviate those concerns because I think there are just so many instances in which she seems to be acting for a fringe minority, but I think she can begin by being open and transparent with the public, by taking questions, by doing public consultation, and by releasing the information.
Okay, next question goes to Dean Bennett.
Good morning. Is Irfan there as well?
Yes, he is, yeah.
Yes, okay. So I've got a few questions, so I'm going to ask my two, but maybe if I can get back into the queue afterwards too for some other ones.
Sure,
first
absolutely.
off, your thoughts on Frank Bosca moving on to sorry?
Hi, Dean. I can touch on this question.
Okay.
While I
Sure.
was,
So my first, yeah, go ahead. Sorry, Bosca. Yeah, Bosca moving on.
while I was driving here, I heard about the appointments. My hope is that the process that's in place for judges' appointment, that's been followed. But the real issue we had with the Justice Department was that we have been asking them to conduct an independent investigation into the interference of Danielle Smith's office into the justice system, and we haven't heard from the Justice Minister about that yet.
Did you follow up there, Dean?
Yeah, I thought he said that there wasn't going to be an investigation. Can I ask you about, Kathleen, I wouldn't mind if you weigh in on this as well, given you used to be Justice Minister. So now we've got a situation where a sitting Premier is phoning people or contacting them or being contacted or talking about upcoming trials with people before the courts. We don't know, we know Pavlovsky. I'm not sure if we know, it wasn't really clear if she'd been talking to anybody else and it was in her role as Premier. But what do we do about that? What do we think about that? And wouldn't there be some sort of, if a politician is contacting people who are accused while they're in the court process, wouldn't they have to disclose that to the Crown? There's my questions.
I can try to answer it, and if Kathleen wants to weigh in, she can as well. I think it's inappropriate for the Premier to talk to Crown prosecutors, to talk to accused in these serious cases. That's the reason that we have been asking for independent investigation. And in both instances, she admitted herself that she has been in touch with Crown prosecutors on a regular basis. And in yesterday's presser, she was asked about it specifically, that has she met with people who have been charged with these offenses. And she again said that yes, she has met. So it is deeply concerning, it is inappropriate, and that's why an independent investigation is needed to make sure that we can assure Albertans that our justice system is independent of any political interference, because all these assertions made by Premier do raise serious concerns about the independence of our justice system.
Yeah, I would say I agree entirely with that. It's the reason we need an independent investigation. People must be able to have faith in our justice system, and I think that Danielle Smith and her actions have shaken that faith. And I think, you know, a minister of justice must be above reproach, and I think that there should be an investigation.
Okay, we'll go to our next caller. Go ahead, caller, your line is open.
Hi, thanks for taking my question. Just on the topic that Dean was asking about, I'm wondering, Kathleen, in your experience as the Justice Minister, do you recall whether or not it was unusual or normal for a Deputy Minister to be appointed to the provincial bench?
I don't think it's abnormal. I think there are instances of ADMs or other public service workers. They're not excluded. The fact that you're in the public service as opposed to being in private practice doesn't exclude you from being appointed to the bench. Yeah.
Did you have a follow-up, Lisa?
Yeah, thank you for that. And I want to be as clear as possible as I can with this question, but I'm still kind of formulating exactly how to ask it. We've got a situation where there are questions about an allegation about interference in justice from the Premier's office. The Deputy Minister, if these allegations are true, would have been privy to what was happening behind the scenes in this issue. So, do you have concerns that with him being appointed to the provincial bench, he would be precluded from being called to an inquiry or investigation on the matter of either emails being sent from the Premier's office to Crown prosecutors, or the Premier's office directly leaning on the Justice Ministry?
Thank you for the question. I think first and foremost, we need an independent investigation, and only then we will be able to decide who was involved, who should be questioned. So at this point, an independent investigation is needed to clarify all these questions. So only that investigation can decide who should be questioned, who is involved, and who is not involved.
Any other questions there, Lisa?
Yeah, I mean, you're not exactly answering my question here. Do you have concerns that he would be precluded from being called to testify in an inquiry or investigation? Do you think that there's a concern there? I mean, you're saying that you're continuing to call for that investigation, but going forward, if that investigation happens, is the former Deputy Minister going to be not involved in this? And how are you not concerned about that?
No, I understand your question. Let me state it again, clarify it again. What we know so far is this, that Premier spoke to a far-right website and admitted that she has talked to Crown prosecutors. Then Premier talked to media and admitted that she has talked to Crown prosecutors about these cases. Then she admitted that she has talked to Attorney General and Deputy about these cases in general terms. Then there was a story from CBC on January 19th that there was some email exchange. The explanation that came from the government was not clear. It, in fact, confused things more. So this whole thing is a mess. So that's why an independent investigation is needed. So to look into the facts, who was involved, what exactly happened, what was the nature of the contact that Premier had with Crown prosecutors or accused, who was involved from public service. So unless there is an independent investigation, we would not know who was involved and who was not.
Okay, we'll go back to Dean Bennett.
Thanks. Kathleen, I'd like to ask you in your former role as Justice Minister. I've never come across a situation where a sitting premier is contacting people before the courts to discuss their case, even if it is just to say, hi, I'm calling to say I can't do anything about it. What kind of a precedent are we looking at here? Is this unusual? Did you have situations in your department where someone a politician or someone would say, look, by the way, I contacted, Or is there any kind of a protocol here or a precedent for what we're seeing here?
I can't speak to an instance in which a sitting premier has called an accused previously. I would think it's a very, very bad idea. I didn't do it. I wouldn't do it as Justice Minister. I've never been premier, but yeah, it doesn't seem, because, I mean, within the justice system, we talk not just about bias, but about the appearance of bias and the impact that that appearance of bias has in public confidence in the system. Because the justice system can't just be unbiased. The public must have confidence that it is unbiased in that way. And so I think that it shakes it. And I think it's a bad idea. Whether there's a specific rule that would preclude it, I don't want to say off the top of my head.
Any other questions, Dean?
Yeah, what was I going to ask? I mean, what does this do? Two-parter then. What does this do logistically to a prosecutor? I mean, you're trying to prosecute this case, and then you find out that the premier of the province, who is ultimately your boss, is calling the accused. What does that do for the logistics of the case? And also, does Premier Danielle Smith, is it incumbent upon her, should she be telling Albertans who she contacted, who has a case before the courts while she was sitting as premier?
Yeah, what I think it does to the prosecutor is it puts them in a horrible position. And I think a sitting premier should never do that. It would be incredibly awkward to find yourself in a position where you know your boss's boss's boss, whatever that is ultimately, potentially intervening in that case. Now, that doesn't change the legal and ethical obligations of the prosecutor. The prosecutor would still be obligated to determine whether the case will proceed on the basis of whether it's in the public interest and whether there's a reasonable likelihood of conviction. But I have to say, it must be incredibly uncomfortable, not just for the prosecutor in the individual case, but for every prosecutor in the public service, sort of being left to wonder when politicians are going to interfere in that way. I think it's problematic. I do think sitting governments have some place in terms of setting overall policy direction and making sure the concerns of the public are heard. But in individual cases, absolutely not. Yeah.
Dean, I also just want to add that in the House rules, when we engage in debate in the Assembly, there is a specific provision that tells us not to engage in matters that are sub judice, that are before the courts. That applies to even debate in the House where we have absolute freedom of speech. So that is inappropriate for a premier to assert that she has talked to Crown prosecutors, she has talked to accused, and I think that gives the perception of political interference in the justice system. It is inappropriate and it must be investigated.
Anything further, Dean?
Yeah, sorry, going back to my second part of my question. Does the premier need to be transparent and explain to Albertans which accused she has spoken to since October 11th, since she became premier?
Yes, and better yet, the premier should never talk to Crown prosecutors or accused about matters before the court.
And why is that? Why does she need to make that clear, who she's talked to?
Because Albertans expect that their judicial system is independent of any kind of political interference or perception of political interference. That's why it's important that she should come clean on this, who she have talked to in Crown prosecution branch.
But Irfan, she also said, well, I only phoned them to tell them I can't do anything. Does that negate anything? Does that make it okay?
I think I was listening to that press conference. If she was running for premier and 2 months ago, she didn't know that she cannot do it. That's sheer incompetence. She is not fit to govern this province.
Any other questions, Dean?
Oh, a bunch, but they'll come to me later.
Okay. All right, you can follow up later, Dean.
Okay, thanks.
Kate, we'll do one more pass for questions on the line. And seeing none, that's all for today.
So much for watching, and to learn more, check out albertasfuture.ca.